Hello everyone and welcome back to Quickflicks, and as you might have noticed, I am wearing the same shirt, and that's because I recorded both the previous double feature episode and this double feature episode in the same day, so in that way, I can get these out in an efficient timeline. So, anyway, today we'll be talking about the new Disney Pixar film Soul and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom from Netflix. So let's start with that one in specifics, the Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. The new Netflix film, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, is based off of the play of the same name and is inspired by the legendary blues artist of the same name, and stars Viola Davis as Ma Rainey. She is the leader of a band, and she is no nonsense. And at times, she doesn't even want to be there. She just wants to get it over with. And at the same time, her bandmates are in the basement practicing, and they discuss their lives, their loves, and what they want to do with their lives in the world of the 1920s era of music, where we also follow Chadwick Boseman, who is also trying to get ahead in life in terms of his own music. And during this heated time of rehearsals and trying to get the thing recorded, there's a lot of heated tension in the room, both from Ma Rainey and the people within the band, and even the recording studio. And it's a cacophony of yelling and sweaty people. This movie is pretty good, and I want to say up front, this is Chadwick Boseman's final on-screen performance, because this year, unfortunately, 2020 took away Chadwick Boseman due to cancer that had not been previously released to the public. In fact, when he died, it came to a shock to everyone. An actor who has been pretty much part of many people's lives for a long time, not just in the Black Panther films, but also in the fact that he has been able to lead by example in terms of other actors in the same similar field. In fact, Denzel Washington, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be having Chadwick Boseman as an actor. He played various people like Jackie Robinson and other characters of that type, and one of the most influential ones, and the one he'll probably be most remembered by, is Black Panther. And that's kind of cool, actually, to be remembered for a superhero that led the way for a more diverse group of superheroes. A superhero, in fact, that Ike Perlmutter pretty much scoffed at in the first phase of the MCU and was like, that's not going to sell. And then years later, it made $1.3 billion and is a marketable franchise. And it'll be interesting what they do with the sequel, but back to Chadwick Boseman here. And I think with what Chadwick Boseman is given here, he's a really talented actor. He's very different than a lot of his other roles because he has to balance a lot of negativity within the character, his frustrations with having to perform for the quote, the white man, of the film, having to put on this facade and not get angry. And he has this really tragic backstory, and it's honestly the most sad thing I've ever seen. But he's also full of life. He's full of energy, and he just exudes that in every scene he's in. And he does a terrific, banged up job. I would not be surprised at all if he was nominated posthumously. Whatever. If he was nominated posthumously for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor or Best Actor, I would not be surprised if he was nominated in that way. Similarly, in that respect, Viola Davis also gives a pretty bare-knuckle performance as this very authoritative, person. Like, she's not too authoritative. She just wants to have control of her voice. She doesn't necessarily want to record her voice, and she has hesitation with that. And it also brings up a point that the music industry has always had, and that is who really owns the soundtrack. Is it the record company or is it the artist? And that has always been kind of part of the problems of studio negotiations and contracts in the music industry for a long time. And it's more especially apparent in the Black community as well at the time. And especially with that really upsetting ending that the film portrays. And I'm going to get into spoilers here, but Chadwick Boseman's character has this sheet music that he wants to run by the studio because the studio's like, okay, well, we love this song. And by the end, you find out that they were interested in the song, they bought the song off of him, but they didn't want to work with him for some reason. And you find out that they wanted to take that song, which was written by a black man, and cover it up by a white voice, which was an all too common practice back in the days when they were trying to pass black artists into white suburban areas. And it's terrible. And another thing I love about this film is how condensed this film is in terms of the set locations. There's only really 3 or 4 different set locations in this movie, which makes for a very economically friendly movie when you only have to build maybe a couple sets here and there and maintain the wardrobe. There's not a lot really that you really need to do other than the lightings and whatnot, and it makes it much more cost effective. And I'd say pretty much for the most part, everyone does a really good job in terms of the acting as well. Not just Chadwick Boseman and not just Viola Davis, but everyone in the ensemble does a really good job with their roles. And I'd say this is a pretty enjoyable little piece of just a slice of life, the day in the life of this band. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed pretty much all of it. And I hope it gets something like Best Adapted Screenplay, maybe some Best Actor noms for Chadwick Boseman and Viola Davis. I could see that. If it doesn't, I would be kind of sad, but, shit will happen. I don't know what will, but, you can never tell with, 2020. So I'm going to give Ma Rainey's Black Bottom an A-. And moving on to the more recent Soul from Disney and Pixar. Soul follows Joe Gardner, played by Jamie Foxx, a middle school band teacher who has dreams of becoming a musician, a jazz musician. And one day when he's given the opportunity to fulfill his life's purpose, he dies suddenly. And he tries to find ways to get back to Earth and comes across a degenerate soul named 22. This soul has had problems trying to integrate and get the final piece of the puzzle that's required in order for this character to go to Earth. But the problem is that this person does not see the need to go to Earth. And so there is some natural conflict, and I'll just leave it from here. This movie is really good. I wouldn't say it's Pixar's best film, because I do think there is some pacing issues. But I love this movie. This movie in every way really tries to go forward and brings about some new ideas into the fray of a Pixar movie. There were times in this film where I found myself thinking, okay, well, where's the usual Pixar stuff? Because there is some usual, Pixar-y type tropes in this movie, but generally this does feel a lot different. This feels wholly unique. And you can attribute that to the writer of the film, Kemp Powers, who is also the co-director. And what I love about this movie is just it's so unabashedly just proud of what it is. And you can attribute that to Kemp Powers' writing. And if you watch the Inside Pixar segment on Kemp Powers, he describes various things that he was trying to do with the script and the script writing process for the film, and how Pete Docter brought up the idea and then Kemp Powers kind of just went along with it and added a lot more authenticity to the script. And he brings up in the film the hair for the black community, which is interesting and it's cool. And I never really thought about the fact that animation rarely at times gets hair right for different cultures. And it's pretty cool to really see his life, his experiences be, imbued into this movie. And I really enjoy that. And I'd say this film really runs off of the idea that it's kind of paced like jazz. There's certain times when it feels like it's going in one direction, but then sometimes at different turns, it'll go in a very different direction than what you would expect it to do. Now there's some parts where that are kind of predictable, but sometimes there's a little twist on some of the things that we would think it would be the whole thing of the movie. And most of that relies off of the second act, where we follow 22 inhabiting the body of Joe Gardner, and Joe Gardner, being in the body of a cat, which leads to a pretty dark joke, which is really funny. And there is a lot of dark humor in this movie that I thought that would not actually be in here. Now, of course, there were certain jokes that were kind of spoiled for me at the beginning, watching all the trailers and whatnot. like the one where like the souls are crushed.
Don't worry, you can't crush a soul here. That's what life on Earth is for.
Those kind of jokes are kind of present in this movie. They're not like all throughout the movie, but they're like paced in here like every so often to just keep the humor going a little bit. Because here, this movie deals with a lot of abstract ideas. Ideas that I don't think a lot of major studios really consider when it comes to talking about these issues. When was the last time that an animated movie really did a concept like the afterlife? Like, as a concept. The only time when I remember it is like All Dogs Go to Heaven. the only other time. But this film takes that approach of like, you know, what came before our lives and what came after our lives, and really personifies these abstract ideas, like Jerry, for instance, which also had a little bit of a segment in Inside Pixar of how they did that. The animator that designed the Jerrys and Terry was influenced by wire art, which is pretty cool and really adds to a different layer of animation style, which is pretty cool. There's different times in this movie that had different modes of styles of animation. Like, you can get some 2D animation here and there, you get your traditional 3D animation, then you get the wirework animation, which is pretty cool stuff. And I'll say this too, this is a really gorgeous looking movie. Really gorgeous. When you get to New York City, all the stuff in New York City is just so lifelike. And when you see, like, humans back in, like, 1995 in Toy Story 1, and you compare it to here, the difference is just night and day. I think Pixar has come a long way in terms of animating human characters as well. Like, we talk all the time, like, you know, hey, look, here, they did, like, toys, and then here they did, like, cars, and then, you know, they do all this stuff. But, like, they've also grown in the ability to portray human characters as well. And they did a really good job here. Now, there is one little bit of criticism that gets kind of thrown around with this movie, and a lot of Pixar movies, is that whenever they have a black lead, they always have to turn into something else. Like Princess and the Frog, you had Tiana, and she turned into a frog for the most of the movie. And this movie kind of does the same thing. Joe Gardner dies and becomes a soul. And for probably about, I'd say, 60% of the movie, he's a soul. For the rest of it, he's himself. And, I mean, they could do a little better, but I get the criticism behind it. I do, because, you know, it is the first time that in Pixar history that they've been able to have a black lead and have, you know, black talent behind the scenes, and you don't showcase a lot of that. But what they do showcase is the culture around it. You know, they showcase barbershops, they showcase jazz, they showcase so many different things in black culture. But again, the whole criticism with Joe Gardner not being Joe Gardner for most of the movie is kind of true. And it would have been nice to see a little bit more of Joe Gardner's life, as opposed to him being stuck in a cat for part of the movie. So, I mean, that is true. But in the process, this film also deals with the concept of purpose. What this movie espouses, for the most part, is we all think we have a purpose on Earth. And we have this idea that's dead set. Our passions are our purpose. But pretty much anything could be our purpose. Our purpose on Earth is whatever we think it is, but our passions are not what gives us purpose. What gives us purpose is being there for people. That's what I got out of it anyway. I know people will have a different, you know, interpretation of the message of the film, but that's what I generally got out of it. Like, we all have our passions. We can still be passionate, but our purpose on Earth, to me anyway, what I got of it is to help other people. And another thing too, one thing that was kind of noticeable too, is how 22's journey in this film is kind of like the inverse of George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. In It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey has kind of a shit life. You know, it's not the life that he wanted, it's not the life that he needed for his family, and thus he says to himself, I wish I was never born. And similarly to 22, 22 doesn't really have a lot of passion to go to Earth or to live. So she's just, floating around there, not really knowing what to do, and just kind of being a nuisance. It's not until she gets into the shoes of Joe Gardner that she truly appreciates just living. Like, that's the thing. And one of the things that is kind of one of the key details that's in this film is that in the film, in order to become a complete soul, you have to find your purpose, your thing in life, right? And Joe Gardner has this idea of, what if the passion is, the purpose? The thing is the purpose. But purpose is defined not by your passions, but by who you are, by living. And that's honestly beautiful. It's a beautiful thing in this movie. So between excellent animation and a story that has themes that are really complex and are pretty interesting to think about, I think Soul is probably one of their better films that they've done in a while. Possibly since Inside Out. And even though I don't think Inside Out is perfect, because that one was very on the nose, Soul is also really good. Even at times, if that one is also on the nose at times. But it's still good. Again, animation's good, the voice acting is great, the story is good, and the themes about purpose and life and death, the concepts of anxiety and depression, how we get bogged down by our own purposes, we get lost in our own tracks, that we kind of turn into sluggish monsters at times. And there's so many interesting ideas that this film puts out there, and it's very interesting, and I really appreciate that. It's a lot of things to think about in one little movie like this. It's not perfect, but it is a movie that is really awesome, and I hope that Kemp Powers, who was brought onto this movie, gets to do more projects, because I want to see what he could do without Pete Docter. I mean, Pete Docter can help, but I want to see him really go straight for another project. Give him another project. I think he does a good job here. So I'm going to give Soul an A. Thank you guys so much for watching my double feature reviews for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Soul. And that's it for the regular reviews for the year. I should have a 2020 update video on New Year's Eve, a sort of recap of events, my thoughts, and where we'll be going in 2021. Should be pretty interesting. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.